Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we are going to look at the differences between the four major geographical regions in ITF Taekwondo. We have Oceania, South America, North America and Europe. And we're looking at the style of sparring that dominates or some of the techniques that are preferred by each of the different regions. So if that sounds something that you're interested in, please stay with us for this one.
Everybody, welcome back to this week's episode. So this is a nice, interesting topic. It's something that we haven't covered yet, but is very applicable, I guess, because it's something that is very much at the fore when we go abroad to World Cups and World Championships. Us being here based in Europe, we see the European style a lot, but then maybe it could be maybe 2 times every second year nearly that you see the opposite style from around the world, and it almost takes that extra time for a style to come through then as a result. So it's an interesting topic, and it's something that we haven't covered yet. So thanks to our members who are putting in some good suggestions in our members group. So that's where this came from. So keep those great suggestions coming of what different topics we can cover here, because we've been covering a lot of topics now over the last, 2+ years?
Yeah,
so
just over 2 years, I think.
A lot of things covered. Exactly. And we just hit the 11,000 subscribers mark as well. So thank you to all of those people who are subscribed. So as Adrian suggested, we're going to look at some of the styles from different parts of the world. Now, of course, this is very general. There's no like one size fits all approach here. So just going to take a couple of people who may be familiar with a lot of people who are watching and what kind of styles they bring, and maybe a general overview of a style, let's say, from a particular region. So it's not a one size fits all or anything like that, but let's have a look at it and enjoy the clips that we have.
Yeah, and I think that what we've picked in terms of the clips are indicative of some of the things that we would think is prototypically European in this case.
Yeah, so for this one, we're looking at the very simple front hand entry versus side kick. So the front hand, front leg, and very much like quick speed, front leg, front hand, defensive side kicks, attacking side kicks. It's something that we see a lot in Europe, that quick blitz. Here's another example of it again, quick entries off the hands. It's very much influenced from like the point fighting blitz style, especially in Europe, and that hasn't yet filtered so much across the world into the other regions, where in Europe it's quite popular.
Yeah, and I think that probably has something to do with the fact that, you know, Wacko kickboxing in particular is very popular in a lot of European countries, North America, but maybe, you know, not as prevalent in South America and Oceania.
Yeah, I think another big highlight in the European style is that front leg shootout. It's something we see time and time again. The front leg is a big part of the European game, and we'll see later on some ways that the other regions maybe come up with styles to counteract this. For sure.
And, you know, I think there's a thing as well of just the geography of the fact that, you know, Europe and, let's say, the United States are not hugely dissimilar in size. So you could still be fighting within your own country as you go from California across to New York. But we've probably covered like across 15 countries if you do that in Europe. And, you know, it means that we tend to end up with quite a homogenous understanding of the game, you know, and things get solved very, very, very quickly. So when someone brings something new to the game in Europe, everybody knows about it within a few months and everyone's working on the solution very, very quickly. So you arrive at things that are efficient, effective, not necessarily the most flashy, stylish, inventive, but, you know, very much streamlined, efficient, effective, and working most of the time against most of the people.
Yeah, front leg game is very dominant here in Europe, isn't it, Adrian? And I think we see that here with Liga and Blue. And now people are coming up with kind of solutions to disguise their front leg a little bit more, to come over the top and things like that. So some interesting variations on the front leg as well that we've seen recently.
For sure, and different ways of solving it as, you know, as are necessarily taken in other areas. So, North America, like some of the fighters that sprung to mind. So you've picked out the Carlos brothers. You've picked out like Maxime Bujold from Canada. What is it about these guys that makes you think, you know, USA, Canada, North America generally?
Yeah, so like we see Canada are really much a squad now, let's say, who are coming up there in the sparring world. But I guess a big highlight for the guys in North America is they have a nice style of trying to lure people in. For me, and you see here Emmanuel Carlos in blue as is a good example of that. And then his brother Julio, he's got some nice flashy shots, and he builds all this again off his good footwork, trying to get people to overcommit. And then on the attacking style, he has a nice bit of flair and a nice ability to get some cool shots off as well, which is a big factor of the guys in North America, it seems.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I suppose I'd add to that is, when you include the Jamaicans and that into, Central or North America, like you will end up with that higher tempo and intensity, and I think that's something they share with South America to a degree, is that the whole match. So you'll see the application of high intensity in Europe, but there are very few people who fight at high intensity the whole way through the match. Whereas I do think when it comes to some of the guys we've seen out of the United States, some of the guys from Jamaica, some of the guys from South America, we start to see this general attempt to keep intensity high for the whole engagement.
Yeah, I think this clip here from Maxime from Canada and Julio from the USA, I think it just highlights some good luring abilities they have to maybe set shots up. So you see here, there's footwork changes and maybe attempts to draw your opponent in to set them up with a bigger shot that's coming down the line. So I think a couple of nice examples there from both guys, two very, very high level guys.
I think one of the things that strikes me when we think of the North Americans, the commitment on the straight line isn't quite the same, and that maybe parallels with Oceania a bit. That there's an engagement onto the distance, but not necessarily looking at the follow through and the continuation on the straight line that you often see in the European side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think they tend to look at the circular shots a little bit more, especially on the counter side, where it's a little bit different in Europe. I think people are very much happy to go off the front leg, front hand, and just literally base their game all around that.
But speaking of those circular shots and the counter game, I think that is definitely something that comes to my mind when I think of Oceania and Australia and New Zealand in particular.
Yeah, and we've got Caravan Roon, of course, who is very much a counter style fighter and was very slick. And I think you got to be very, very precise and solid off the shots here to be able to land them as well. So we see this counter backhand that we've shown time and time again. So very nice shots there from Carl, and a great ability to counter.
And I think, Carl being quite influential, and, Carl having been a successful sparrer for New Zealand, has let, him, among others, carry an influence in Australia and New Zealand. And, people will take something from that, and, it's just going to have a lasting impact in the same way as, let's say, a Thomas Barada or a Stefan Tapalato over the years have had in Europe, or even, the success of the Polish national team had in relation to a way of training or to spar. And, I think a well-timed, well-placed counter has its own appeal, and if that's a little bit prevalent, rather than, let's say, Alice Emrich's pressure style, if you have to train a totally different way to become good at each of those. So
yeah, I think the Oceania style here, we can see the similar kind of ideas of trying to draw people in that we've seen with the guys from North America, but it's just a bit more of a relaxed fashion, isn't it?
I think it's more cerebral. It's a thinking man style like that. It very, very much looking to think their way through the fight, solve problems. Rather than trying to dominate with a particular characteristic or technique or approach. It's looking at solving the problem in front of them and understanding the whole game to do that. I think that would be kind of characteristic of the way that a lot of the better fighters from Oceania fight.
Absolutely. If we compare the two styles, then I guess the guys from North America are probably looking to raise the intensity, where the guys from Oceania are potentially looking to kind of relax the tempo a little bit, just to make you overcommit and give yourself more time then to be able to counter and pull off nice shots.
Yeah, so as we jump into South America, we start to see some significant differences coming in.
Yeah, for me, a big factor with the South American style is the back leg turning kick. I think that's massive. And we see there's variations of this as well, but we see Nicholas Duchard here coming off the turning kick as well, even after it comes directly from Bustamante, from the original shot off the front leg. So again, we covered Pato from Argentina. Again, a big shot as that back leg dolio as a counter style, which we don't see that often in Europe unless it's off a high section side kick, let's say.
I do think another thing that we see as well as this style, and we'll see more of them from a lot of the South Americans, is the willingness to go the other direction to North Americans and slow the tempo. And I do wonder how much of that is just the sheer size of some of the tournaments in the likes of Argentina, where, if you're going to have to win 4 or 5 rounds at home in a national tournament, that you might not want to go 100 miles an hour all round, for every round.
That's true. I think another huge factor, of course, with David Kerr, who we covered in depth with an interview, is his feints and his front hand. I think the South Americans try to use their front hand much more to set their attention to the upper body to set up the legs as entry. So usually we see the entries a little bit different in Europe off the legs, where the South Americans here we see Seba and Blue using the front hand to kind of almost distract the eyes and take away from what's going on downstairs, let's say, to also extend the range and potentially bring down that intensity, like you said, to kind of make it less intense.
But it does, and if you're planning on using that back leg at all, you do have to find those disruptions of rhythm or distance, because otherwise the back leg is an easy counter. So you need to force the person to make those mistakes and to get their rhythm a little bit wrong, or to fall into your rhythm in order to make that back leg effective. And definitely seeing some of that from both David Kerr there and from Seba Larashi here as well.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with the styles, is that it takes a long time for them to change, because the guys in Europe see each other often, but these guys don't see each other as often, so the styles will literally kind of tend to stay around the same neck of the woods. So here we have Vetrano from Argentina and Kenneth Edwards as well. So you can see, I think the Argentinians generally, they if they're not that like very patient counter style, they're solid fighters and they're go-getters, let's say. So Vetrano is one of those guys who goes for it, and I think that's a common trend as well in Argentina in particular.
But I think, do you know what, you'll when you get to the very, very top level, I don't think you see as much distinction between the top level fighters. Like, you can see a lot, you're going to find someone who fights like Seba Larashi in Europe, you're going to see someone who fights like Danilo in North America. But I think when you get down into the World Cup kind of level, where you're going to the club level sparrers, you're going to that slightly lower than national team level, you start to see a lot more of the commonality, of individual stylistic differences. And it just shows, as much as our sport is international, the international component of it only drops down the first level or two. And the people in the levels below that, who are, just turning up to their regional championships, their national championships, aren't necessarily watching, studying, and certainly trying to implement strategies to deal with, if you're in Argentina, you might not be dealing with looking at what the Europeans are doing or what the guys in New Zealand are coming up with, because it just may not ever relate to you. So then all of a sudden you find yourself at a World Cup, and I remember being utterly surprised when we went to Brighton and we were watching what Ken Edwards and Nicolas Dussard and the other Jamaicans were doing, and going, are these guys crazy? Like, the risks that they're taking, as we saw it, like, oh my gosh, a lot of flair, a lot of different shots, and we were looking at that going, okay. But they were catching people by surprise in the first round or two. And even further, like, as Ken Edwards made the final there.
The final in that one, 63 and
85, 80. Oh, it was probably 80 at the time,
80 back then, yeah.
But it was just the power of doing something unexpected. And I think the answer to that is, it's not that any one of these regions has the better style or the more effective style. It is really about understanding what the strengths and weaknesses of your game are and how to apply those against, other people. And the fact that you can sometimes make a little bit of an assumption about certain countries, certain people coached by a particular coach or by certain regions, it just helps us chunk information as a competitor or as a coach that, once upon a time, I didn't have to know anything about the competitor from Poland. I just needed to know they were from Poland, and I had a fair idea of how they were going to approach the match. Versus now, where the fact that they're from Poland almost doesn't matter. They could be sparring in a whole range of different styles, and that means I actually have to understand them a little bit more than previously. And the same was true of Slovenia. All of Master Brada's fighters were, very similar in terms of their game plan. And now, although there are similarities in terms of their ideology and approach to the game, they use different tools to get there. And that's cool.
That makes sense when you think about it too, because if these guys see each other day in, day out in training, they have to come up with the solutions to their training partners.
Yes.
So they can't always use the same style and hope to be better. So they have to come up with better solutions.
100%.
So that's another kind of like variation of that as well, that allows you to come up with your own little small bit of recipe to come up with the problems that you see, which allows you to give you your own little flavor and style as well.
Absolutely. And I think, as we look at it, it's a lot more exciting for us as Europeans to go and see something from a Pan Americans or, a New Zealand Nationals or something along those lines, because we're going to see things that are just a little different in tempo, in the distance between the fighters, in the, the feints and lures that are effective and that are working, in the setups for particular techniques. We're going to see things that we might not see at our Euros and the Open Championships, around Europe. And I think that is also a fantastic thing that people can do to look for inspiration in terms of, okay, it's not all about figuring out how to do what the last European champion or the last Pan American champion did. It's about figuring out how to beat, how to win the next one. So you're always looking to iterate on your own game. So seeking a little bit of inspiration from what the other continents do, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah, and we covered that in a members video last week, I think, where we focused on some champions from the Euros, and we titled the video "What to Copy, What Not to Copy," and we went in depth into the things to look at there as well. So this week's on the members section. Then we had a look at not special technique, but power breaking, and we actually broke it down like we do on Fight Chat Friday, a little bit different this week. So really interesting to see different styles. So it's the styles and variations of power breaking as opposed to this episode, which was in sparring. So you see different ways of breaking, different mechanics, different angles, etc. What works, what doesn't work. So if that's something that interests you, check that out on our channel.
Absolutely. So folks, that's us for this week. Another episode in the bag, and for those of you who are staying with us each and every week, thank you so much for following along. That's us for now, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.